Electrocast.
Welcome to Missing the Point. It's Michael Marcangelo here to talk about the Patriots offseason and some pre-draft thoughts. And to do that, I enlisted the help of a very, very special friend. She is well known for her great coverage with the Boston Herald and now MassLive's, but she is our favorite guest, the one and only Karen Guregian. Karen, how are you?
I'm doing well, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing really well. It's always weird doing the intros after talking for 5 minutes before we hit record.
It is true. But we have to get those formalities out of the way, right?
That's right. Yeah, I got to keep the lights on. What we were just talking about, before we get into all the things I want to talk about today, we had you on the show before the season started last year. And you and I were just discussing how the year prior, you picked them to go 8-9. You hit it right on the number.
Yep.
Last year, you picked them to go 7-10, and we all thought that was low. All of us here.
Yeah.
Turns out you were too generous.
And I thought I was being generous. But I guess I was.
Yeah, that's real generous. So before we talk about the offseason, I kind of want to get into, did you have a chance to catch the Dynasty on Apple TV Plus?
I did. I caught it over and over again.
What were your reactions to that as someone who's been around the team for the entire Bill Belichick era?
Well, I had several reactions. The first one was, as somebody who was there through that whole, I've been there through the whole thing, 20 years of it, I was fascinated and gripped by the player interviews more than anything.
Yeah.
Because, covering the team, and as I think it was even pointed out in the documentary, or you saw Bill Belichick in the locker room basically threatening everyone if they said anything to the media. It's like, don't say anything. And again, that's how he ran his ship. And it was effective. Sometimes you'd be able to talk to somebody at a locker privately off the record. But I was blown away by all the stuff that they said, the players, on the record about certain time periods, the Malcolm Butler situation, Aaron Hernandez situation in particular, blew my mind. I don't say the honesty. It's not like they weren't being honest during those times, during those time frames. It's just that they weren't allowed to talk. They really weren't allowed to provide any of their thoughts, any of what they felt during the time. So I was riveted to those parts, and they were littered throughout. By the same token, it was tough not seeing, or seeing the second and third Super Bowl kind of done away with like that.
I know.
A 21-game win streak, not even mentioned.
Yep.
There were parts, that were kind of not, or just glossed over. And it's tough. I know it, I've talked to people who, put it out. They said they could have had a 20-part series given all the material that was there. Some people were angry over, more of the negative things being highlighted over the positive, but it's a documentary. It's not, it's not like those DVDs you got after every Patriots Super Bowl that highlight all the great and good stuff and celebratory stuff. But I did think there was a sleight of hand a little bit toward who got all the blame for certain things that went wrong with the franchise. And I'll just keep going for a second.
Yes, please.
There's no question that Bill Belichick had a hand in a lot of the, obviously he was responsible for benching Malcolm Butler, right? He was responsible for keeping Aaron Hernandez, even though Hernandez asked to be traded. He was responsible for putting up with Aaron Hernandez. But by and large, there's still a hierarchy here,
Yes.
you know? So I just thought it was kind of all the blame was a little too focused on him, even though he deserved quite a bit of it. So, outside of that, as I said, I learned some things from listening to the players.
I thought that the most damning part of that docu-series, and I don't wanna call it a documentary because I guess it was based on in fact, but
It was
not
based
all
on a
the things.
book. It was based on a book.
The book was awesome, was absolutely
Yeah.
awesome.
Right.
But the most damning that Aaron Hernandez episode, because up until that point, like, even in, the media, you would hear, like, this is a Bill hit piece, and I didn't really feel that way
Yeah.
until that episode.
The latter episodes, I thought,
Yeah. Yeah, I
um,
mean, did anyone get wind of the fact that Aaron Hernandez had requested a trade at the combine that year, or was that kept under wraps until after?
it was kept under wraps until the wheels pretty much came off after, post arrest
Yeah.
and stuff like that. You know, I was told way back when he was like, that came out, but as it pertained to the Patriots, he was kind of down to strike three. Like
Yep.
they, one more strike and, you know, they were going to tell him to hit the road.
Yep.
But obviously the third strike was the, the third strike.
Yeah. Yeah. Why
Mm.
do you think that neither Gronk nor Brady gave any or gave any usable take on Aaron Hernandez? Because that was the two noticeable things on that.
Well, I now do a podcast called Eye on
Oh,
Fox Pro, and I had the director of said Dynasty on. I didn't ask him about Gronk, but I asked him, why was Brady MIA from that particular episode? And his answer was that, you know, they only had a certain amount of time with Tom Brady. And the more important questions were like Deflategate. He had his own, you
yes.
know,
Yeah.
sagas to talk about, and they didn't want to use up all the time. That again, I'm just repeating the answer. It was hard to use up a lot of time on that part because
Yeah.
had his own issues throughout. Well, and his departure, the relationship with Belichick. So again, if they used up 5 minutes on Aaron Hernandez, that would have been 5 minutes less, getting him to talk about Deflategate, his departure, yada, yada, yada.
And I mean, Bill's answer was just so Bill. Between that and the Malcolm Butler one, like, he is the only person in the world that is riveting to watch, not answer, and not say a word. Like, he just looks at you like he wants to kill you.
I told someone it was like he was like putting his middle finger up
Right.
the whole thing. But imagine if you were doing an interview with someone was just kind of sitting like this, you know? I mean, during the whole thing, you
I
know?
mean, he this whole docuseries, I mean, I would say obviously when Bill
Mhm.
left or was fired or however you want to say it, his approval rating in New England was probably at an all-time low. After this, it went up again. People felt bad because I mean, it looked like a hit job. Were there any surprising reactions from anyone without giving names in Foxborough after watching this?
I think, well, several people have come out, players, basically saying whether it was Rodney Harrison, Matthew Slater, and others, basically saying we sat for like 6 hours or two
Yeah.
days or whatever it was, said all these glowing things. Devin McCourty was another one.
Yep.
You know, all the, Devin told these great stories that never saw the light of day. The only clips you saw of him were like him being critical of Bill during Donald Trump,
Yep.
you know, presidency run. And the
Yep.
same thing with Matthew Slater. And, they said, at least they told me they recited chapter and verse of great Bill stuff that the editors and or director opted to keep on the cutting room floor. So in that way, they weren't happy with it. They felt duped, thinking, hey, I sat for 6 hours. This is great. This is going to be a great documentary.
Right.
And then they definitely saw it as a hit job.
How? Okay, so let's just say that the Patriots don't go 4-13 last year. How do they release that documentary and Bill Belichick is still the head coach?
Yeah, that's a great question.
There's just no way, right? Like, because
I think
that
they
was
hold it.
that.
I think they hold it. I do. I think they hold it. Because I
And
don't
they
think, there was stuff out that said this documentary is coming, the Dynasty is coming, it's coming, it's coming. But there was an open-ended date to it. I think after they went 4-13, after Bill was done away with, we have our dates.
yeah.
This is where we're gonna spring it. So
That's what I was thinking the entire time, like the last 3 episodes. I was just thinking, man, like, what if were they gonna release this if they didn't release him? Because that would have been, I mean, talk about angry Bill in front of the press. That would have been something. Absolutely something.
excuse me, I have to sneeze. Achoo. Oh, all right.
Bless you.
I stifled it. um, yeah, I can see no way they could have released that if he was still the head coach. So my guess is they would have put it off for a year.
Yeah.
So
So, given the big change, right? Bill Belichick out, Jerod Mayo in. For someone who was there the entire 20-year run, how different is it covering the Patriots now, like this offseason, compared to any of the off seasons that you were covering when Bill Belichick was the head coach?
well, the first thing is it's like you get answers to questions. I mean, it's like,
Right.
oh, he answered that question? Yeah, he answered that question. And I think, whether it's Jerod Mayo, I think he legitimately tries to give you answers. And unfortunately for him, almost to a fault. He's
Right.
almost too open. He's almost too honest. Which would I prefer? I would prefer, as a journalist, the openness, honesty. I want to know what you think,
Yep.
as opposed to the Belichick way of I know nothing, I say nothing, and you're going to get nothing. School. But over time, I don't know if I've said this to you or said this on the show, but over time, I came to understand why Belichick was like he was. And, you know, it worked well with him being the one voice. It worked well with the players falling in line and basically giving the message that he wanted them to give. So he wasn't constantly putting out brush fires, or players weren't having to constantly answer for what other players were saying about this,
Right.
that, the other thing. So, you know, Belichick considered all those things distractions. So he tried, by basically being the one voice, by basically not allowing the players to say much of anything of substance, he was able to control the narrative that came out of Foxborough, and he
Yep.
was able to keep the distractions at a minimum. Obviously, they created there were distractions, Spygate, Deflategate, Aaron Hernandez, I mean, on and on and on and on. But the little, day-to-day ones, they there wasn't any because nothing came out of Foxborough.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I feel like to that point, when Mayo, when talking about the cap space early on, and he said, we're gonna break the bank. And obviously
Burn
the
some
minute
cash.
burn some
Burn
cash. Yeah.
yeah.
Like when he said that, instantly, I think Patriots fans, around the country were like, whoa, like if you don't, now we understand why Bill said nothing. Because now the expectation is out there.
Right.
Right.
But again, it's a rookie head coach making a rookie mistake, right?
Oh yeah.
Like he spoke out of, and I've talked to him about it. As a matter of fact, he first walked it back to me.
I know.
Basically,
Yep.
I misspoke, Karen. I misspoke on that one. But it was, I think that interview with EEI happened a day or two after he was formally announced. He was excited about things. He knew what their cap space situation was, and he was, he's excited and knowing what the cap space situation was, but really not really examining the picture of how many free agents in house he had to sign, who was out there in free agency, that actually
Yes.
fit they needed. Again, as he said, he misspoke. And it's not
Yep.
like they weren't going to spend cash. But when you say we get some cash to burn and, with that, even if he said it kind of in a kidding way, you have to understand the fan base and
Yeah.
you have to understand the expectation that creates. And if the Patriots didn't spend madly like drunken sailors, it was going to be disappointing.
Right.
So basically, you have disappointment.
Right. Especially, 3 years after Belichick spends $250 million. Like that was actually spending. And he spent real money. You can say that it didn't work, but he got some, Judon's a great player. Hunter Henry's a great player. He hit on some of them.
Right. His batting average is maybe 500 on that.
Yeah, we'll take that. Why do you think why do you think neither Bill nor Rabel found themselves at a head coaching position this offseason?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Belichick really thought he had Atlanta sewn up, but
Me
they
too.
they get they get scared. Well, two reasons. I think both they're defensive minded coaches, and we're in an offensive driven league. That's not to say it's funny. There are quite a few defensive coaches out there, but I think teams are looking for that like offensive whiz kid mastermind,
Yep.
like Daniels of the world, right? They're looking to plug in an offensive mind in it as a head coach. So that was one strike against Belichick's need for control, basically having final say, running the whole operation. I think that ultimately is what had Atlanta having cold feet, because there were a lot of people who were close to the owner, Arthur Blank, who expressed a fear of losing their job because Belichick was just going to come in and clean house. So I think that they just couldn't navigate that part of it, right? Even though after the fact, Belichick's people came out and said, "Oh, he just wants to coach. He just wants to coach."
Sure.
Right. But the other thing is when you have a head coach who's won 6 Super Bowls over and has had a dominant team for 2 decades, is he just gonna be, are you gonna cut him off at the legs?
Well,
Seriously?
I think Bill not getting a job makes more sense to me than Vrabel because of all the things that you just mentioned. And also, that it's pretty much borrowed time with Bill. You
Mhm.
probably have him for 3 years. So are you willing to risk blowing up everything that you've built just to get him for those years? So I get that.
Makes sense. And again, he's like he's gonna coach 2 years or 2.5 years, 3 years, break the record, and then, you know, head out to his boat, I'm not sure. Even, like, the reason, why they dumped him in
Yeah.
Tennessee,
Yeah, because he came to the Patriots Hall of Fame ceremony.
and they thought that he had something in the works or lined up to be the Patriots head coach, and that wasn't the case.
Oh,
So Amy Strunk or whoever it is, the Tennessee Titans owner, thought he was being disloyal and just canned him.
a year after, was it her or was it prior ownership gave him all the keys to the castle?
Right, right.
But which doesn't make any sense. So now we get to talk about the fun stuff. This is where I think I really shine and you always bring me back. The Patriots offseason. What is the most surprising move or non-move of the offseason so far, in your opinion?
Well, I wasn't there's a couple, actually. I mean, I knew that they had in-house free agents.
Yep.
They again, Jerod Mayo said it. Elliot Wolf said it, that, they one of their priorities was keeping some of their core pieces who were free agents in-house.
Yep.
I wasn't sure they were gonna, like, I don't wanna say break the bank, but spend as much as they did for Onwenu, even though they really needed to. See, it's just we've been so preconditioned to the Belichick way that that I'll get someone off the street. I'm not gonna pay that amount. I'm not gonna overpay that amount for that guy. I'll just coach up somebody else. And that's
Yep.
always been his way. So I was pleasantly surprised because most people thought Onwenu was gone, you know? But I think they saw the reality of the fact that I think they were done with Trent Brown.
Yeah.
You know, go ahead, find 2 tackles. Really. So it was out of necessity. But again, Bill wouldn't have cared if he had 2 holes at tackle,
No,
right?
doesn't care.
No.
Nope.
He wouldn't have blinked. There would be no blinking, right?
Right.
This side, the new regime blinked for Onwenu. So that was a pleasant surprise. The other pleasant surprise, it's funny, both a surprise and a disappointment. They actually offered a wide receiver 22 million. It's like, Belichick, oh my God. I think the
Oh
highest
God.
paid a receiver was what? 9 million a year, Randy Moss.
Yeah, and he
Think
hated it.
about it.
He hated doing that too.
Skill receivers, skill positions, he just refused to pay, you know?
But he paid Gronk and Aaron. Like he recognized those two positions, but wide receiver, I don't think he cared or
Right.
valued them, you know?
No, he had no value. He had no value for them. But guess what? They were part of the start of the 2 tight end set,
Yep.
it's like they revolutionized that. Of course they're gonna pay the tight end, you
Right.
know? But even with Gronk, they did it grudgingly. His injury history played a part in that. And then at some point, Belichick tried to trade him to Detroit.
Yeah, how can you trade me? I'm retired.
Or how could
Right.
or yeah, well, you can trade me too, says Tom, if you trade him.
Yep. Can I tell you my biggest surprise?
Yes,
Thank you. That they paid Jacoby Brissett $7 million and they would have needed to pay Russell Wilson.
true. Very good. I think Russell Wilson is cooked, though.
Okay, sure. But we
But
both agree that,
I know it's 2 different things.
yeah, but we both agree that this year is probably not going to be a playoff berth for the Patriots unless all hell breaks loose in the AFC East, which, could. But Russell Wilson is a known commodity. He'll sell merchandise, right? He'll put people in seats. Assuming you draft a quarterback, he, he'll he'll hold the fort down for a year. And oh, by the way, Denver's paying the full salary.
Right. Here's what they didn't want with Russell Wilson. His diva personnel. I mean, was he gonna work with a rookie who's gonna take his job?
I don't.
Oh,
I
no. But let's backpedal for a second. Jerod Mayo acknowledges that they completely messed up with Mac Jones. They didn't surround him with enough support, and that goes with personnel, that
yeah,
goes coaching. The people around him weren't helping him, succeed. I mean, does every quarterback need to have his hand held? No. But when you have a rookie, right, that you take in the first round, And A, you give him no weapons. B, you give him a sieve for an offensive line. C, in his second year, you give him a coach who's never coached offense before. I mean, really? I mean, basically, how to break a rookie quarterback in 2, 3 short years. I think they wanted to avoid any possible pitfalls, pratfalls, any possible way for the rookie that they're about to draft to get messed up. And again, if you have a strong personality, and then, other rookies have learned from diva type quarterbacks. I mean, Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers was still good, and Brett Favre treated him like dirt. So, some people can succeed. I just think the Patriots, given what happened with Mac Jones, didn't want to take that chance. So they paid for a safe pick, a mentor, someone that they know, and someone who's learned from Brady, someone who's been in the system, same system that their new offensive coordinator has. So it seemed like a no-brainer for them almost to bring him in for however long, if he has to start at the start of the season, play half the season or the whole season or whatever it is. Jacoby Brissett was a safe choice for them to make, given all that went on previously with Mac Jones in the previous regime.
Yeah. I I completely agree with and understand that sentiment.
Mm.
The thing that I don't understand though is, let me just pose this question to you. What is smarter? Pay $8 million for a guy who may not light the world on fire, but will definitely create a good environment for your presumptive quarterback that you draft, or paying $1.5 million for a guy who might make it a little harder on the rookie, but also might win you some games.
Yeah. For me personally, I would go with that choice, especially if I was the owner of the team and wanted to put it and wanted to put fannies in the seats.
If Bill was here, he would have taken Russell Wilson,
Of course.
just like he did Cam.
Right. Cam Newton, bring him in.
Yep.
Yeah, in July. Come on down. Come on down. Got no quarterback? Come on down. You're fine. Yes. And guess what? Bill did accomplish the mission with Cam that first year, in terms of interest level,
Yeah.
you know, and Cam was a showman. There's no question about that. And he was a good talker. And, his problem was he just couldn't play anymore,
Just
you
couldn't
know?
throw the ball.
Yeah, couldn't throw the ball. But I think Russell Wilson is getting to that stage.
But again, not to focus on someone else's offseason, but the Russell Wilson thing like stood out for me and I wanted to ask you about it because I I hear what you're saying about a prima donna, right? But do you think that's why Pittsburgh was able to get him and Justin Fields because Tomlin has such control in that room that they're not worried about him being that?
Right. But I also think they got Justin Fields because they are worried that Russell Wilson might be shot. So,
But he had such a good year last year. I mean, if you said he was shot after 2022, sure, I'm with you. But last year he was pretty good.
yeah. He also had Sean Payton calling the shots. So,
Are you a Sean Payton person?
well, I think he's pretty creative in building an offense around the quarterback. Hello, Drew Brees, New Orleans Saints, you
Yeah.
know? Um, and I think his creativity is very helpful. And, again, we have an offense driven league,
Yep.
Um, but I'm just not sure. Again, I think Peyton and Russell Wilson ultimately clashed.
Yeah.
So, maybe Russell Wilson wanted to do more and Peyton didn't want him to do more. Again, these
Yep.
things have a way of coming up. So We'll see. Russell Wilson might completely thrive in Pittsburgh. Again, they have weapons. They have people around him to make him look good, right?
Yep.
So, and if they can, it's almost like buying time to see, you know, Justin Fields can develop better. Even his situation with Chicago, he probably should have sat that first year. Why? They had no line. They had no weapons. Again, they just figured well, he's elusive. He can run. No, he was sacked like 60 times that first year.
Right.
Right.
They paid so much for his backup plan too. They paid Nick Foles and they paid Andy Dalton, and they still just threw him out there to get
Right.
hurt.
Right. Because, sometimes people cave to the demands of we want to see the kid. We don't want to see, you know, Nick Foles, right? Again, if you're trying to put fannies in the seats, do you
Yeah.
want to see the quarterback you take with a top 10 pick, or do you want to see some old buddy duddy?
Right.
I mean, but I think that first year really hurt Justin Fields.
And it's crazy because the first year here really helped Mac Jones. It was the last two that destroyed him.
Right. It's like he went like this and then went off the
Yep.
cliff.
Yep.
Whereas Justin Fields was like down already and he was slowly climbing back up.
Yeah. It was crazy. Once you gave him a number one wide receiver, how much better he got.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, he still has some accuracy issues, but again, right, maybe they can coach that out of him, They coached it out of Josh Allen in Buffalo, right? Because he was that first year, oh my
Yep.
God, he threw it all over the parking lot.
But then they got him Stephon Diggs, who
Right.
covers up a lot of problems.
But they also, got him. They also had a really good quarterback coach in Brian Dable, who
Yep.
basically beat those throws out of him. Yes,
Yep.
And it's funny, once he left, Josh Allen was a little bit back into that wild throwing,
Yep.
but he had to, rein it in. Sometimes when you have too much talent and too much arm ability, you think you can make any throw in anywhere in any circumstance, but it's just not the case,
I mean, Brett Favre made a career out of it. We all knew that he was going to throw across his body in that 2009 NFC title game. We all knew he was going to do it, and he did it.
Right.
And he got picked.
And Mac Jones tried to do it and just didn't have the strength to do it.
It was almost sad to watch. It was sad.
The deconstruction of Mac Jones.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I was going to say the destruction, but you said it way better than I did. So before we get into the draft, there was an article that I think, you wrote, you retweeted. We jumped in to defend your honor, as we always will, about
Thank you.
the difference between the rebuild that's happening here, or that should have happened here after Brady, right? And what's happening in Houston. Now, Mayo talked about this. He did say it took Nick Caserio, 2 years to build the team in order to get CJ Stroud and now Stephon Diggs and Joe Mixon. But yes, have you seen anything so far this offseason in free agency that leads you to believe that the Patriots are on that same trajectory?
Nope. I will say this though. I mean, I think they did a good job bringing back the players they wanted to bring back,
Yep.
who are essentially the best players from a 4-13 team. Sadly, as I said, Mike Onwenu is their best offensive tackle. They had to resign him, and he's good. He's very good. He might be better at guard, but they're so desperate he has to play tackle, and he plays very good at tackle. Hunter Henry is a good tight end because he's catches the ball and he can block, and he's just a good guy to have. Now they brought back Kyle Duggar. Initially they transition tagged him, but that turned into an extension.
Real
So
money too.
yes, real money. They brought Uche back. Although, I mean, this is like the thing that's interesting is a lot of the free agents they signed and a lot of players, they're only like 1 or 2 year deals. And those can work one of two ways. One, you get the best out of these guys because they're playing for a contract.
Yep.
Or in the case of free agents from the outside, it's almost like, well, I don't, if I'm going to be with a stinky team, I'll see how it is for a year and then get the heck out.
Yep.
No, it's like having 1 foot in the door and 1 foot out.
Right.
So, but I think, players will be incentivized if they're, again, playing for their next contract, which quite a few Patriots are once again. So I mean, that's an interesting component. What the Patriots haven't done that the Houston Texans have done, it's like when was the quarterback going to be available? Well, as it turned out, they wound up building before they got the quarterback. It doesn't happen
Yep.
that way. Cincinnati got the quarterback and then built around the quarterback. But the key word on all these things, build, right?
Right.
So the one area of greatest need was offense, was receiver, was offensive tackle.
Yep.
And all the things you need to make a quarterback, to help the quarterback, they haven't done.
Yeah.
They
I'm gonna say this so that you don't have to, because you talk to more people than I do. They have 3 great number 3s at wide receiver.
Yeah.
And I don't want to disparage anybody because they're all far superior athletes than I will ever be. But if you're within striking distance for Calvin Ridley, you can't let that player leave, right? I mean, I don't think he's worth $24 million a year, but that's the asking price.
He's definitely not worth that. But you, meaning the Patriots, meaning the previous regime, whatever, created the situation they're in.
Right.
And the situation they're in meant they had to overpay. They had to
Yep.
do what you don't want to do, overpay. And they had to overpay for several reasons. One, they're a 4-win team. Two, Brady's not there. There's no quarterback there. They're in a tough division. It's a cold climate. They get taxed through the roof,
Yep.
unlike some of these other places. And people say, the tax should yeah, the tax does matter,
Sure.
especially if a team like the Patriots doesn't want to pay the commensurate, you could say the word, amount above, so that after taxes, it comes to the same level as what the other
Right.
team is offering or a little more. So the Patriots weren't willing to do that.
Do
So,
you do you believe when Kraft says that the reason that Calvin Ridley's not here is because his girlfriend, although it's his wife, wanted to play in the South?
well, I think some of the reasons mentioned were valid. The tax,
But pay him
maybe
more. Just pay him more.
exactly. Or if the wife preferred playing there, well, if you pay him more money, is she going to start grousing?
No.
Right?
Right. Yeah, I just think,
He
one
makes
of the things.
an offer he can't refuse. Right. Right.
Right. One of the things that, and not to go back and forth about, Bill, but I think it's relevant when you talk about, we as fans have always said that Bill was cheap. Well, Bill's gone, and it looks like they missed out on the best wide receiver on the open market because they did not want to spend.
Right. I would use a different word for cheap for Bill.
Frugal.
No, arrogant. And the reason I say arrogant is he believed he could coach up whoever. and he wasn't going to overpay or even pay the market for anyone
Anybody?
because he had such a healthy sense that he could outcoach anyone in the league during games and that he could coach up players to be better than they were. Some of that proved true. I mean, he could scheme up a defense to stop a quarterback or stop any quarterback for a half a quarter or at least long enough if he had an offense that could score.
Yep.
But he also had Tom Brady, right?
Right.
And when you have a quarterback like Tom Brady who can make people around him better, so he was making everyone on the offense around him better, and
Yep.
Bill was making everyone on the defense better. Why do you have to go out and pay the top guys the top money? There's no
Right.
need. So I would call it necessarily cheap. He thought he was being smart
Yep.
and arrogant because they could overcome not having, all that elite talent. Although I think in saying that, it shortchanges, the people that they had on those teams that won.
Yeah.
Rodney Harrison, Richard Seymour, Vince Wilfork, Rob Gronkowski, they did have Deion Branch. They had really, really good players, Hall of Fame players.
Yep.
But were they as loaded as a team like San Francisco is right now? No. They
No.
didn't have to be. The difference is they didn't have to be. They had Brady, who basically made the offense better, and they had Belichick, who basically made the defense better.
Yeah. Belichick needed the position that he valued the least, more than anything, so that he could do what he does. Because you're right. If he has a quarterback, just look at 2006. They go to the AFC title game. They're up, 24-3 against Peyton Manning. And their number one wide receiver is Rashae Caldwell.
Right.
I mean, that's all you need to say. That's because of Brady and Bill. Sure. But Brady.
Well, how about the Super Bowl or the year that they lost Ty Law? And Bill calls up Hank Poteet and brings him in off the street. They win with Hank Poteet playing cornerback.
Yeah.
And whoever
Yeah.
it was. Right? But when stuff like that happens, it fosters the arrogance. Right?
Of course. And you can say, well, Brady had nothing to do with it. It's because I can put them anywhere they want.
That's right.
And he was almost validated. You know what? There may not be a better 7-9 team than the 2020 New England Patriots, because if they had a quarterback that could throw, that's probably a 10 or 11 win team.
That might have been one of his best coaching jobs. I mean,
Right.
you had COVID. I mean, you were dealing with all kinds of stuff
Yep.
that year, right?
Yep.
I almost think, when Belichick took over, now you have to remember, Robert Kraft just gave Drew Bledsoe $100 million contract, right?
10 years, right?
Right. So, you know, Kraft was happy to spend then, but then
Yeah.
Bill would say, you know what? You don't need to throw your money around like that. You really don't. Especially when they saw what they had in Brady.
Yep.
So I think by Bill being tight with the purse strings or managing it the way he thought that they could still win, again, utilizing Brady, utilizing his genius on defense, he made Robert Kraft a ton of money.
Oh, yeah.
Saved Robert Kraft a ton of money by not
Yep.
having to pay out these exorbitant contracts. And by having a quarterback in Brady, who didn't need to break the bank,
Right.
be the highest paid.
No, he just wanted to win. That's all I wanted to do is win.
Right.
Which brings
And
us,
he did.
of course he did. And in the year he left, he won. Again, shocker. Brings us back to Nick Caserio.
Yeah.
Why do you think he's able to do in Houston? Now, obviously, it's probably because of where they lie in the draft, right? They never picked high here. But what do you make of what he's been able to do in terms of rebuilding and also the splash that he made in this offseason?
Well, two things. I think obviously he learned from Belichick. You can't not be around him and not learn and not learn how to evaluate talent. Although people in the final 5 years of Bill's run here probably questioned if he knew anything about talent. uh, but that's not being fair. Belichick, brought in people like Mike Vrabel who were, rejects elsewhere. Rob
Yep.
Ninkovich, reject elsewhere. There were plenty of examples of players he brought in here who flourished, who didn't elsewhere.
Yep.
So I think the difference for Caserio, he has final say there. Bill always had, Nick could pump a player and he could say, I don't like N'Keal Harry. And Bill says, well, too bad. I do. We're taking him. And that's the difference.
Yeah.
I mean, I
I,
hate
I almost forgot
in a
about him.
nutshell, but Nick didn't have final say here,
Yeah.
you
Could have
know?
had DK Metcalf and not.
Right.
Oh, God.
Well, and that's who the scouting staff wanted. That's who they basically said to Bill, that's who's on the top of our board. And Bill said, yeah, thanks for that. I'm going to pick this kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
But stuff like that happened all the time,
So
especially in the early picks.
hindsight being 2020, and knowing what we know now about Caserio's job so far in his last 3 to 4 years, should Bill have listened to him a little bit more when it came to offensive talent? Because I think Bill, you know, we're gonna we're we're gonna talk a lot of trash about Bill, and people always have, but he
Caserio was
nailed.
an offensive player. I mean, not a good one, but he was. But he was also, he had so many roles. I mean, it's amazing all the things he did, along with kind of being the director of player personnel. He was like an eye in the sky for the offense. Like he would like be in Josh McDaniels' headset, telling him what he was seeing from above. He was like what Ernie Adams was to Bill. He was to like McDaniels.
Wow.
Being eye watching down on the field and saying, you know what, I think you can exploit this or, whatever. But did that. He played quarterback in practice, like he acted to give the quarterbacks a break, so their arms wouldn't fall off. I
Yep.
mean, he just did so many jobs, but, ultimately, in the end, when it came time to the draft, if Bill didn't agree with whoever Nick or the scouting staff said, this is the guy who's number one on our board, too bad.
Yeah.
It was too bad because Bill got what Bill wanted.
Well, he earned the right defensively in the draft. No matter what you want to say, he I know, which is odd because he hadn't re-signed one of his first, second, or third round draft picks since like 2014. But he could find them, and I think he should always get his flowers for that. Always.
Again, in the Bill model, there was no need to resign anybody
Let's go
because
get him again.
bring in somebody new, coach him up, and they would
Yeah.
be just as good as the last guy or better, right?
Yeah.
So
Before we talk about this year's draft and what we think's going to happen, we'd be hard pressed not to talk about Mac Jones and the fact that he was traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars. He's going to be the backup quarterback to the number one overall pick in the same year that he was drafted back in 2021. I think if you want to say that, I would say that Trevor Lawrence is the only quarterback from that draft that is still with their drafting team. I don't even think about Zach Wilson. I'm not going to talk about him. What do you think it's going to take for Mac to get a starting job again, or do you think that he's irreparable?
Well, I think Trevor Lawrence is going to have to get injured, and Mac is going to have to come in and save the day and show that he's past, you know, the broken quarterback he was when he left Foxborough. I mean, that's,
So you don't think that he could be in a situation like a Brian Hoyer, where a couple years down the road, a team signs him as a backup to compete with this for a starter? Do you think that his stock is that low in the eyes of NFL executives?
right now it is. And I think he knows it. And I think he knows he has to rebuild himself. But he sees who's the quarterback in Seattle. I mean, he get tossed.
Geno Smith?
Right. I mean, he's resurrected himself. Baker Mayfield another number one overall pick who was kicked
Yep.
around and kicked to the curb and said was useless, brought the Buccaneers to the playoffs.
Yep.
So I think Mac Jones seeing what's happened with players like that, that gives him some hope that he can resurrect his career and that he can put what happened in Foxborough behind him. And now it's just a matter of him to shake all the bad habits he got into playing behind a line that didn't protect him for a large part. And again, he was just so shell shocked that even when there was protection,
Yeah.
he was fidgety. It was like there was no protection. I mean, that's how bad it got for him. He was seeing ghosts.
Yeah, it was like, is that 2012 or 2013 Brady in Seattle? Do you remember that when he was ducking and no one was near him?
Right. That's kind of it happens to the best of quarterbacks after being pounded and pounded and pounded,
Yeah.
Breaking out of that is something else. And the other thing that happened, Mac, because he had no weapons and nobody who got open, I mean, he's a smart guy, but he started doing stupid things like
Yeah.
throwing across the field and trying to playing beyond his capability. And again, that's what killed him. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Mac is this great quarterback. No. But he could be a functional, capable quarterback who could lead a team in the right circumstance. But
Yeah.
he did not have, I mean, you saw that the first year. He didn't have that year 2 or 3.
I thought, looking back at Mac, his he should have been a guy that maybe couldn't win you a game, but definitely would not have lost you one. And then you saw everything that happened these last 2 years. It's not all Mac's fault. Like I know that like you said that before, for all those trolls on Twitter, like STFU, but it's because there was everything so bad around him that in the moments when he could have not made a mistake, he did.
He didn't help himself,
Right.
both on the field, but also off the field or during games. Showing up coaches is just not a good thing. Like his
Well,
dismissal of
Patricia.
Patricia. Well, especially when you have a coach like Bill Belichick who put Patricia in that place, and basically Mac is saying, screw you, or throwing his arms up and whining, get the play in. I mean,
Right.
it, you
I
just,
I hear that.
it's just, again, sometimes you just gotta take the medicine and take the punishment and, you know, live another day if you're dealt a bad hand like that. But, you know, he whined and complained and went outside. Again, he called Alabama people for help, and that got on Bill's nerves.
Which doesn't make sense because Bill would often call Nick or Urban and ask their opinions on players that were coming out of that program.
Right.
Like that was just Bill being just a dick for no reason. Sorry for the language. I
Yeah.
apologize.
No, but you're right. You're right. So Mac didn't help himself, put it that way. did not help his situation, his cause, or his case
Yep.
by certain things that went down and certain things that happened.
On to potentially happier times in the 2024 NFL draft. The New England Patriots have the number 3 overall pick. Karen, two-part question. In an ideal situation, what do you want them to do? And then what do you think they're actually going to do?
Well, if, I'm led to believe that and this was going back to the combine, that they liked the 3 top quarterbacks.
Yep.
No, it wouldn't matter who fell to them at 3, that they would still have faith or belief in that quarterback and would said whoever, whether it was Drake May or Jaden Daniels, obviously, because Caleb Williams has been the number 1 from jump.
Yep.
Whoever fell to them at number 3, they would say, thank you very much. And, move on to the next need.
Yep.
Right. But, this is before pro days. This
I
is
know.
for interviews, and this is before lying season and smoke screens
Yeah. AKA JJ McCarthy.
and the rise of JJ McCarthy.
Right. Right. Right.
So, um, and, you know, if someone's going to offer them 3 or 4 first round draft picks for the picks, you got to think about it, right? I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think between them, liking both Daniels and May, between the fact that the team owner, Robert Kraft, would like them to select a quarterback, and also the fact that they're in desperate need of a new franchise face, it's almost like you, take the quarterback if you like the guy there.
Yeah. Now, I hate myself for saying this, but doesn't the 2021 draft tell us that there really isn't that much of a discrepancy between a number 3 quarterback and a number 15 quarterback?
Yeah, they're
Trey
all bad.
Lance, Mac Jones.
They're all terrible. Yeah, historically, you would never take a quarterback ever because
Well, number 1, you do. Like you
well,
typically don't miss on those.
honestly, the odds are weighted heavier that if you take one in the first round, you have a better chance of succeeding than any other round with that
Yep.
quarterback. That being said, there still isn't a great batting average
No.
for quarterbacks in the top 5 that have been taken, say, in the past 10 years or more.
I mean, just look at the draft from 2021. It was Trevor Lawrence. It was Zach Wilson. It
Yeah, 5
was
guys that we thought were like, oh my God.
can't miss. I mean, Zach Wilson, BYU. What are you talking about? Everyone knew that was going to be a bust. Everybody.
Right.
But Mac, that was, I mean, also Alabama quarterback, so we could have predicted that.
National-
Do you have a
National championship quarterback with a great team around him. Sound familiar?
Yeah. Oh, well, okay. So do you have a preference between Jaden Daniels or Drake May?
I really like both, and for different reasons. I think Jaden Daniels could be electric, with his legs, and his accuracy throwing the ball deep is so impressive. I mean, the year he had 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, I think it was. It's like unheard of.
Yep.
And he didn't turn the ball over. He didn't go down as much as a quarterback you'd like, given his stature, and that scares you a little bit. But for the prototype of today's NFL quarterback, I mean, he's in the Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts category. That's an exciting quarterback. And those quarterback win games. They're tougher to defend because of their legs. Okay?
Yep.
So that's why I like Jaden Daniels. The reason I like Drake May is completely different. He has the measurables. I mean, he's a big kid. He's a tall guy. He does remind me of Josh Allen because he's a big guy. He doesn't run quite as much as Daniels, but he'll run, and when he runs, he'll run over people and they can't bring him down because he's 6'4", 6'5".
Yeah, he's like Big Ben.
He's like Big Ben. He's got a rocket for an arm. He's not always, he makes some plays that kind of make you scratch your head. Like, how did you miss that throw? And then 2 plays later, he makes this throw that makes your jaw drop.
Yep.
So the talent is there. It's just a matter of harnessing the talent. And wait, here's the key word: developing him
Yeah.
and developing that talent, right?
Yep.
So, um, do the Patriots have those things in place? Not all. I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, Van Pelt, Alex Van Pelt, their offensive coordinator, has done really well with quarterbacks. Same with Ben
Yeah.
McAdoo. Again, they're not the young, brilliant minds that you have in other places, but they're experienced guys. Do they?
Offensively experienced too. That's
Yes,
the key part.
yes. Do they have an offensive line? Well, that's still TBD. We'll see what they do in the draft or who else they might pick up. Do they have an arsenal, a good enough arsenal to support that quarterback? Definitely not. But there's still time to build that arsenal. So I think if you're picking number 3, even though the odds aren't great, if you're picking the third of the 3 best quarterbacks, right?
Yep.
I still think you have to take a swing. You're not going to be in this position every year. You're not going
Hopefully.
to the talent pool of quarterbacks that you have now. And, already people are saying next year won't be anywhere near as good. So if you have the chance, take the swing. That's what
Yeah.
I say.
I tend to lean more towards Jaden Daniels for one reason. I was in Columbia, Missouri in October of 2023 when Jaden Daniels went 15 to 21 for 260 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then ran for 130 yards and a touchdown. And I've never seen anything like it in person. Like I think obviously his passing ability is helped by the talent that was around him. What I like more about Drake May is that he put up all those yards and those stats with essentially to scale the type of weapons
A
that he would have in New
Patriots
England.
offense.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So he could do it, but Jaden, he might be more electric. He might be.
Right, right. Ultimately, I think, again, if either one is there, I think they should take him without question.
So you won't trade out.
Mm-mm,
Will
no,
they trade out?
maybe.
Well, if somebody offers them 2 firsts and
I
a
think
high second, yeah.
again, I think that they're going to be torn because, you want to make the owner happy. The question is, are you going to make the owner happy with the quarterback you get later?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Or in the second round, third round, fourth round. Is that quarterback good enough to be the face of your franchise? Or again, will what you do be enough to get your fan base excited again? I don't think
Yeah.
getting Bo Nix will do that. I'm just throwing that out there.
Or Penix.
It's I mean, in terms of, I think his ability to throw the ball would have some people excited. But again, how does he do when the line didn't protect him? How does he do when against a really you could throw the ball great like he does, but if you're not anywhere near as good against a good defense, what good is that?
Yeah, then you're just a poor man's Drew Bledsoe
Very
because
good.
I love Drew.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy could throw it 80 yards and on a rope,
Mm.
but he never had a good offensive line.
Penix is
And
fun to watch throw a football. I
yeah,
mean, his pro day, the game, not the championship game, but the game before. It's like you were drooling at how well he threw the ball. But then he actually went up against a defense and turned into
Right.
so,
Turned into Chad Pennington.
right. So, but I think the potential of both Daniels and May is what you're looking for. And that's not to say that both or either of those two are going to wind up being stars. Because ultimately, nobody really knows what these guys are going to be.
No.
Nobody knows. It's all
Nope.
guess. But if you base it off traits, if you base it off potential, Daniels and May are head and shoulders above those below. And Caleb Williams is actually above those two. And
Yep.
again, it's just based on Caleb Williams is based on talent. I mean, he's incredibly talented, what he can do, both running and throwing, and how creative he is. He is Mahomes-like in that way. And fine, that's good luck to you, Chicago. The other two are more, whereas Caleb Williams is more of a given, the other two are more potential. And again, it's how can you bring that potential? Can you get them to meet that potential with
Yep.
how to develop them? Simple as that.
That's right. Well, before we get out of here, Karen, I know that you did mention the podcast. I want to make sure that we give you ample time to push some new product. So tell everyone about that podcast, the name and where they can find it.
Well, MassLive, we've since the season started last year, we started doing a Patriots podcast. It's called Eye on Foxborough. The two colleagues I work with, Mark Daniels and Chris Mason, do 2 of them a week, and they do it together. They talk about the games, they talk about the games ahead, they talk about subject matter. Me, I'm in the middle of the week, and I bring in guests. And last week I had Matthew Slater on. The week before I had Rob Gronkowski on. So I like to chat with other people. So I try to bring in timely guests and good guests to make a good podcast. And again, I'm new at it, so I'm learning on the job and hopefully getting better at it each week.
Well, ever since you came on our podcast back in 2021 for the first time, you're a natural. I mean, you're great at this, easy to talk to. You are by far our favorite guest. So I really thank you so much again for taking the time to do this with me. And for Karen Guregian, this is Mike Marcangelo from Missing the Point saying we'll talk to you next week.
Welcome to Sarah Talk Solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, you've tuned into a bit of a different type of show. I'm Sarah B and I'm your host. You can find me on my IG, which is Aussie_Sarah_LA. I talk about amazing, relevant conversations and topics and what functions that goes on in this magical, wonderful, wonderful city of the City of Angels. My IG, which is Aussie_Sarah_LA.
Electric acid.